Welcome, investors, to the Absolute Return Podcast, your source for stock market analysis, global macro musings, and hedge fund investment strategies. Your hosts, Julian Klimachko and Michael Kesslering, aim to bring you the knowledge and analysis you need to become a more intelligent and wealthier investor. This episode is brought to you by Accelerate Financial Technologies. Accelerate, because performance matters. Find out more at accelerateshares.com.
Welcome, podcast listeners, to the Absolute Return Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Klimachko. I'm joined by my co-host, Mike Kesslering. And on today's show, we welcome special guest, Dan Wagner, Rezolve's founder, CEO, and chairman. Rezolve is a leader in mobile commerce and engagement. On the podcast, Dan discusses key lessons learned from 35 years of entrepreneurship and 7 successful startups, the opportunity within mobile e-commerce, his game plan in taking Rezolve public, the most important aspect of the Rezolve story that investors should know, and more. So with no further ado, here's our show with Dan Wagner, Rezolve's founder, CEO, and chairman. Dan, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you on the show today, chat about you, your amazing entrepreneurial track record, and what you're up to these days at Rezolve. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this podcast.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks for the kind words. I wanted to kick things off just getting into your track record of success as a founder and entrepreneur leader as well. It's amazing because you founded, I believe, at least 7 companies. The first online information platform in 1984. So a true veteran of the startup game. I was wondering, what are the things that you look for in terms of an opportunity when founding a new venture as you transition between idea and a business?
So I like to look at things, in a sort of creative way because, I don't look at what's been done. But you can hear that I'm an English guy. I'm based in the UK, and it's easy to look over the pond and say, no, that's a really cool idea. I'm going to do that over here. That's not the kind of things that I do. I like to look at things in a creative way and see whether or not we can create something new. And all the businesses I've created over my career have been things that had never been done before, or that they were, innovative in some way, that tried to solve some problems. And, like the first company, which you mentioned, when I was in 1984, when I was 20 years old, I started a company to digitize newspapers, trade journals, periodicals, and make them available online so that people could interrogate them. And this was, 6 years before Tim Berners-Lee presented the concept of the World Wide Web at CERN, and 8 years before we started using www, and 11 years before Amazon started its business. So, it was pretty early days of the internet, in a very sort of internet 101 kind of way. But that business went on to become the world leader in online information. We listed on NASDAQ, we listed on the London stock market before I sold it to Thomson Reuters in 2000. And I cut my teeth as an entrepreneur with that because I was 20 years old when I started, and I was 36 years old rather when I sold it. And I learned an awful lot along the way, as you, of course, you would do. The second business I set up was in 1998, and this was a cloud-based enterprise e-commerce platform. And again, cloud and a cloud-based platform. The word cloud wasn't being used in 1998. The idea of a SaaS technology stack, which is a single instance multi-tenanted architecture, meaning that you build it once and you can serve many from the same stack. You don't have to spin the plates of running from one place to another. You can run many, many merchants on one platform, many, many customers on one platform, was kind of novel and hadn't been really tested. So we built this platform called Vendor. It was a commerce platform for retailers to run their e-commerce site, and we ran Neiman Marcus and Land's End and TJX companies and Under Armour, J.Crew, LL Bean, and many, many others. We're a market leader in Europe. By the time I sold it to Oracle, it's now called Oracle Commerce Cloud, and they run their enterprise commerce stack to merchants through that. And again, that hadn't been done before, so it was kind of a take on how to run a platform, but doing it in a much more cost-efficient and scalable way. And of course, we come to Rezolve, and Rezolve is the same thing. It's a SaaS platform. It's a new kind of commerce infrastructure designed for merchants to engage with consumers via their mobile phone, something that we've been struggling with as merchants for the last decade and a half or longer. and merchants in the high street have suffered to the point where they've gone out of business, because they haven't been able to talk to consumers who walk around their stores looking at phones, but aren't interacting with the store that they're in, They're interacting with Instagram or something else. And you need to connect that missing link. And I was very frustrated during my period at Vendor, which was the e-commerce platform, by the fact that we weren't addressing this problem for our retail customers. We weren't solving it. And it's not an easy problem to solve. But I think that we're doing it with Rezolve. And I think that Rezolve, the vision for Rezolve is to be the Intel Inside of mobile engagement, or the standard. And all great technology, transformative technologies have been based on standards. So you have the Wintel partnership, which powered the PC industry, or you have VHS that powered the home recording industry. We see Rezolve as powering the recovery of physical retail as a core part of the shopper's experience.
You mentioned your current project, Rezolve, and we're going to get into the weeds on that one in a moment. But prior to that, I did want to read a quote to you from Thomas Edison. He said, "I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." So in your 7 startups over 35 years, I was wondering, what did you find that didn't work? The knowledge that you can pass on to perhaps new founders, new entrepreneurs and leaders. What sort of, not failures, but things that didn't work that you came across?
So I think that everything I've done went through periods of not working. And I think that, most entrepreneurs are familiar with the idea of pivoting, or they've read about it, or they've heard about it. And all businesses have to do that. They have to move and migrate and manage and develop as they go through the path of getting to success. And it's not an easy journey. It's an iterative learning experience. So all the businesses I've ever been involved in have been through this dynamic of having to accommodate the changes in the market to survive, and by doing so, end up hitting on the winning formula. And I think that comes from, you quoted Thomas Edison. Of course, he was an incredibly creative, innovative individual who extraordinary talent. But he wasn't looking at what was out there and redeploying it in a new market, which is the point I made at the beginning. He was doing something new, and I think that I've fallen into that. I wouldn't dare put myself on the pedestal of Thomas Edison. That would be outrageous. But the principle of creating something new requires a kind of agility and a kind of perspective around you that allows you to react to the feedback you're getting from the market, to determine to reshape what you're doing such that you end up with the winning package. Reid Hoffman said this great thing about being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and building the plane to fly you to safety on the way down. And it's very true. I mean, it is that kind of adrenaline rush of having to create something that meets the needs of the market, when not necessarily understanding that what that is when you jump off the cliff. You've got a view, right? But you don't quite know exactly how it all fits together. And, in most of my career, these pivots have not resulted in the destruction of that entity, that business at that time, and the loss of people's money. Unfortunately, it has happened once. You just pick yourself up and you go again.
That's a really good point with respect to being reactionary, listening to the market, and pivoting when necessary. Now, from a macro perspective, it appears you've always focused on internet and e-commerce, and certainly that fits in with the Rezolve story. What appealed to you in that segment, that sector of the market?
Well, when I started, remember, we're talking back for a long time, 1984, people didn't have computers. People didn't have mobile phones. The fax machine had only just been introduced. It's a difficult concept for us today to think about in terms of how we, we didn't have a mobile phone, right? So, how do we live? It was very different. And I'm sitting there watching television, analog television, when a program came on about the future, talked about new things, new innovations and stuff. And it explained, computers can talk to each other down the telephone line. And I found this just mind-blowing, I understood what a fax machine was because I'd seen them around, worked in an ad agency at the time, so I understood what they did. But what I didn't appreciate was that it was all based around data going down a telephone line, and that same transport mechanism can be used to interrogate a computer which had a lot of data in it from a device, thousands of miles away. And so the idea came to me that if I could use that same mechanism to interrogate news articles and market research and chemicals and aerospace and intellectual property patents and all that sort of stuff, it would save people all the time having to go to the library. Because in those days, you'd actually have to get yourself into a taxi or get on a bike or go on a bus and go to the local library to thumb through news articles. That's how it was. If you wanted to find something that appeared more than yesterday. So, it was just an epiphany at that moment that if I digitized this thing into a database, then people could search it. Because today we don't even think for a second about the implications of something like that because we're so familiar with it. And you could argue that I missed an opportunity to be Google, right? I mean, you could argue that, but I was the kind of, pioneers often get shot in the back. There is that saying, and I have no, I don't think that was the case. I think we were providing a corporate library. In the 90s, if you asked your lawyers for a patent search, they were using us. I launched MSN with Bill Gates in 95 because we provided the news and the stock prices and all the stuff behind that first version of MSN. And we were providing CompuServe and other consumer services in those days. So we were kind of a B2B sitting behind everything. But, the creativity that comes from understanding how the markets may develop is something that I feel that I'm just fortunate enough to have been born with, or, I have that kind of inherent sense. I'm not a technologist, I'm a marketeer. And so I just feel something's right. I don't do the research and plan it out like you'd expect a corporate division looking to enter a new market might do. It's much more intuitive than that. And I think that's difficult to describe or understand. It's just purely a creative thing.
Right. Sounds like more of a gut feel than, testing out the market. You just got to go for it.
Yeah, it is. But the gut has been kind of, on point, throughout my life. I mean, it feels like it's been on point, and so I'm comfortable with where it takes me.
Certainly, that makes a lot of sense. And your current company, the one you lead and was founder of, Rezolve, has a platform that allows merchants and brands to convert media into an interactive experience on a mobile device. Can you explain to us exactly how it works?
So let's just talk about the problem for a second. The high street is suffering. Retailers on the high street don't really communicate very well with consumers who are in the nearby area or who walk by or even walk into the store. There is a somewhat disconnect there. And over the years, we've seen what I would call like disaggregation of those retailers through the online channels. And what we've tried to do is, I tried to create a new kind of environment. I mean, I sat down with my team some years ago and I said, let's imagine a world where the retailers don't have any systems. They don't have e-commerce. They don't have a point of sale. They don't have any infrastructure. And the consumer just has a mobile phone in their hand. How would we talk to that consumer? How would we interact with that consumer and their mobile phone? That's how I wanted to start the brainstorming that led to Rezolve. And, the mobile phone is an incredible device. It can see things through the camera. It can hear things through the microphone. You can interact with it through the touch screen, through tapping things. You can, where your location is. You can talk to Bluetooth devices. It's got all these amazing features which are not replicated on a desktop machine. And e-commerce, which has been around for a long time, we've talked about m-commerce for equally long time, certainly 20 years. But m-commerce, as we know it today, in my view, doesn't exist until Rezolve came along. I mean, m-commerce is e-commerce packaged to fit a small screen. That's not m-commerce at all. That's just e-commerce with a different size screen. That's not the same thing. So we tried to imagine how to talk to a device using just the capabilities of that device. And what we ended up was a new kind of commerce platform. Think of it as like a Shopify, but designed specifically for mobile devices. And what it does is it allows the merchant to use all of those triggers I just mentioned, image, audio, geo, Bluetooth, to engage with a consumer on their phone. I'll give you some examples, right? Because it's difficult to imagine when you're talking about something so ethereal, so creative. It's sometimes difficult to picture it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm the New York Giants. It's 6 p.m. on a Monday night. And Monday night football is kicking off at 7:30 p.m. And the Giant Stadium has 3,000 empty seats. How am I going to sell those seats today? I can't. They're empty. That's the reality. It's the same with a matinee performance of Hamilton, half an hour before the show goes on. It's the same with so many of these kind of hospitality kind of environments. So Rezolve, the New York Giants can put a geozone around the stadium, a mile and a half, 2 miles, and ping everybody with a New York Giants app. These are fans. And say, there's tickets for tonight's game. You're 10 minutes away. We'll offer you your tickets at half price. Bring the family. Don't watch it at the pub or the bar. Don't watch it at home. Bring your kids. Come to the stadium. And they can fill those seats because a lot of the fans would be very happy that they don't know that they can get tickets. They don't want to go and stand in the cold hoping that somebody's going to sell them some tickets. They want to try and get box office remnant tickets. They're just not going to do that because it's too cold and it's too much trouble. But to click a button on their phone and the tickets are out in their hand and they just get, come on, we're going. 10 minutes later, they're in the stadium enjoying a hot dog and a Coke and getting ready to watch the game. That dynamic has not been served well. That's just one. That's one trigger. But it's an illustration of the kind of thing that Rezolve solves for merchants. And, there are many, many others. But that's the kind of thing. So we have created a new kind of platform, and it has infinite potential and infinite possibilities because any merchant can use their creativity to use these triggers to create engagements that I can't possibly imagine today because the creativity of the marketing agencies of these merchants is going to be far greater than my thinking on the spot now.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Accelerate, one of Canada's most innovative and fastest growing alternative investment solution providers, with a suite of institutional caliber alternative ETFs for investors seeking diversification and long-term performance. The Accelerate Arbitrage Fund, symbol ARB on the TSX, is the world's first SPAC-focused ETF with a diversified portfolio of SPAC and merger arbitrage opportunities in an easy-to-use, low-cost ETF. The Accelerate Arbitrage Fund ETF trades under the symbol ARB on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Find out more at accelerateshares.com.
Absolutely. And filling in inefficiencies like that is just an incredible use case. And like you said, there's going to be a number of different use cases that we're not even aware of today. But getting on into a little bit more granular level with Rezolve, can you talk a little bit about the profitability and the underlying unit economics of your business?
Yeah. I mean, we're having, look, this has been a long-term vision and it's taken some time for the rubber to hit the road, and the revenue to flow. I've been very fortunate that the investors who've backed me and my own, inherent focus on making this happen have seen us through a period of no revenue. But in the last year, in the last 12 months, which is the first full year of trading, Rezolve generated over $80 million in this first year, which is quite extraordinary for a startup, for a startup year. This year, 2022, we will do $219 million in revenue. That's 133% up. And we are extremely confident in these numbers. These are numbers delivered through our existing channels, through our existing partners, whereby we don't need to depend on something to be delivered or some technology to be delivered to enhance the product or some new customers to be signed, some new partners or distributors to be signed. Our go-to-market model is to work with partners who have reach into merchants and into consumers. And sitting on the back of these giants, they then roll out to their existing captive market base. So in China, we have a partner, which is the state-owned enterprise China UnionPay, and they have 11 million merchants that they serve. And we've penetrated a tiny fraction of that merchant base today. So we have an almost endless growth potential there. Similarly, in India, we're partnered with a number of partners who bring us hundreds of millions of consumers and millions of merchants. And so by just rolling out to that existing base of merchants and consumers, we will deliver the numbers that we already have in the model. And we're very, very confident of those numbers. But at the same time, we're in negotiations with new partners in North America, in Latin America, in South America, in Europe, who will follow this model, right, as we roll this technology out, because it's innovative and new and different and exciting to our partners and our customers. And as we roll these things out, it further extends the potential of our revenue growth and momentum. And, I've been building businesses an awful long time, but nothing Nothing has taken off like this. Business is in a whole different league. It's fantastically exciting. It's taken 35 years to be an overnight success, as they say. But it comes from the fact that we happen to have the right product at the right time. Maybe it's something to do with the COVID pandemic that we've just sort of coming out the end of, and the impact that's had on physical retail. I don't really know, but maybe that's accelerated the take up and adoption of our product by partners and by merchants and consumers. But whatever it is, doesn't really matter. The point is that we are sitting in a very unique opportunity now of having something very compelling that's very much needed by the market and not having any competitors. There is no alternative. You either don't use us or you do use us. You don't use us or you use somebody else who can do something similar, because there really isn't anything comparable.
A 35-year overnight success, and what a great milestone. No other great milestone than going public, but you are no stranger to taking companies public. You took Dialogue, previous one of your businesses, public in the 90s as one of the youngest public company CEOs. So these days, a bit more experienced. Why are you taking Rezolve public? What's the game plan?
Well, so look, we had the opportunity to take capital into Rezolve in the private markets at much more material valuations. The fintech space is highly valued in the private sector. Valuations of $20, $30, $40 billion are not surprising. Companies that grow this fast are rare entities. So you're right. Why didn't we stay private? And the answer to that is that Rezolve is a global standard in the making. It's the Intel inside of mobile engagement. It is the standard infrastructure, just as I said, the Intel and VHS, powered industries. We believe that Rezolve has the same characteristics to help solve what we know as an ailing high street, to help solve how magazines and print media is suffering and finding no vision on how to get out of it. And we can transform those static media entities into dynamic, transformative publications. And many other things that we help solve, which, too numerous to go in now. But the point I'm making is that given the import of what we're doing, we needed to be public. We needed the market to know. We needed the public listing to allow us to raise our head above the parapet and allow other interested parties to learn of what we're doing in this forum, like we're doing now through this podcast, which we wouldn't have had if I was a private company. We wouldn't be interested, and your investors wouldn't be interested, or your viewers. So this spreads the word and builds on the awareness. And I think that what we're going to see is a growth story in the public markets over the next few years that's going to be just quite extraordinary to follow as we grow as a business and in quite huge leaps and bounds, as we add new territories and markets to our offering, as we become more familiar to consumers, for you, Julian, and for you, Mike, to use the product and you use the technology, which of course at the moment you're not. And as that starts to happen, it begets greater momentum, greater growth. So that's part of the reason. The other is that I can use the public company status and my network through my public company advisors to pretty much get to anybody now. If I wanted to meet the CEO of AT&T, it's not going to be that difficult to get close, right? Or even get in front of that individual. When you're a private company, that's not really possible. So public companies have a lot of value that isn't always obvious to entrepreneurs before they have either experienced it or become a public company. And so that's one thing. And another thing is that we've got tradable currency in our paper that allows us to do acquisitions, tactical acquisitions that will give us footprints in new markets quickly. And I like that. And we're going to be very active in M&A. So, there's lots of, and I probably haven't covered the half of it. So there's a lot of reasons why being a public company makes a lot of sense. And, I'm very happy to have the visibility that public, or the scrutiny that it brings with you, because I think that's healthy when you're onto a winner, right? Not so healthy if you're not, but, but we think we're onto a real winner here. And I think the next few years is going to demonstrate what a fantastic business this is. What a experienced and dynamic team we are, despite the fact that we are older than the average for internet type of companies. We're experienced. We know what we're doing. We know what levers to push and to pull. And we know how to build market leaders. And that's what investors are looking for. They're looking to back winning teams as well as winning companies.
One interesting aspect of your going public strategy is that Rezolve is headquartered across the pond in London, but chose to go public through SPAC Armada Acquisition Corp 1 and list on the NASDAQ. Why did you choose this specific strategy?
Because North America is going to be a huge market for us.
Right.
And the UK is a backwater, relatively. And look, I've always been an international CEO and an international entrepreneur. I lived in New York. When I started my first company, the online business that we talked about earlier, there were no customers in the UK. Nobody had a computer here. I came to the US for a trade show and I sold 3 contracts in the first few days. So when I came back to London as a 20-year-old, green guy, I said to my board, I've got 3 contracts. And they said, well, what are you doing back here? I said, right, okay, fair enough. And I moved to New York. And of course, the business took off. And then I lived, later, I had a very big operation in the States and offices in 11 cities and so on. And then I moved to Silicon Valley and lived there for a while and so on. But, I don't see, I might be British and I might live in the UK, but, I'm constantly traveling international, or was until COVID. And I have a global outlook. My businesses always have been operating around the world, Japan, China, India, all across Europe, of course, and North and South America. So, and Africa, I should add, we're not quite as more South Africa than anywhere else. But the idea of listing in the States, this is where a technology company like Rezolve needs to be. NASDAQ, the US market understands the incredible ambition and vision that we have in Rezolve. They get it, that they may not choose to buy our stock, some investors, but those that do buy into the vision and realize what we're trying to achieve. Unfortunately, the UK investor community and most of Europe don't really have that perspective. They're a bit more parochial, and that's just the way it is. I don't form part of that mindset. I'm a bit more internationally shaped.
And one key characteristic of Rezolve, and you alluded to this, is the just tremendous growth. And you're actually forecasting a revenue compound annual growth rate of 133% in an investor presentation. Yeah. What are some of the key drivers of this growth and what's going to lead you to become, a billion-dollar revenue company?
Well, we're going to get there very fast. That's the first thing. And we're going to do so because we have a very interesting go-to-market strategy. We charge merchants, very small amounts of money. This is not a big ticket item. This isn't a multi-million-dollar sale to a corporate to use our tech. This is, Dan's hardware store on Lexington and 37th can create a GeoZone on our platform using the tools that we have on the web for a couple of bucks a day and talk to people in the local area, which is, absolutely, palatable and cost efficient. So ours is a numbers game. We're about numbers. We're about volume. We're about standards, and we're about market footprint. Small amounts of money from a very broad base of merchants and partners. And we go to market by working with people who provide services to broad base merchants, a broad base of merchants or a broad base of consumers. We get to the consumers by being added to an app. So, for example, a bank could add our technology into their bank app, or a telco could add our technology to a telco app, or a social media company like Pinterest, or a wallet like PayPal can add our technology to their apps. And what that does is, the consumer wakes up the next day, the app's been updated, Rezolve is inside. They don't know. It's just a capability. And then what happens is the merchant, wherever they are, can talk to consumers with that app on their phone. They can talk to them in the ways that they cannot do today. And in the example I gave you with the Giants Stadium, they can talk to them in ways, of course, the Giants have their own app, so they just put the tech in their own app. But for small merchants, they can talk to pretty much anybody. And that's really how we go to market. So we sign a deal like we did with MobiKwik in India, which is the PayPal of India, really, if you want to put it that way. And the next day, we're on 120 million consumers' phones. They don't know it at that point, but the next time they walk into a GeoZone and they get a notification from MobiKwik saying, hey, do you want tickets to the cricket, which is starting in 10 minutes? So it's an enabling technology, and it sits behind these partners. And that's why we get scale so fast. It's a very effective route to getting vast scale. And in terms of reaching merchants, our partners are typically, UnionPay in China is a merchant acquirer, also known as merchant acquirer. They provide the card machines that you go in and you pay with your card or you tap with your phone in retailers' establishments, and they process the transaction. And in the West, there's players like Fiserv, who we partner with, or FIS, or Square, maybe, or people like that, who provide terminals through merchants. And so we partner with these guys and we say, introduce our capabilities to your merchant base, and you can share the revenue with us. So it's a very kind of democratic approach to the market. It's not us knocking on doors. We don't have to go raise hundreds of millions of dollars to knock on doors of everyone down the high street one by one. That's just not a commercial proposition that I'm willing to take on right now. Our proposition is to sit alongside our partners and help them deliver solutions to their merchants that are helpful to those merchants and help those merchants survive. And if you think about where we've got to with the COVID pandemic recently, transaction volumes on the high street and in theaters and in restaurants have been massively decimated in the last 2 years. People just have been unable to go there, and now they're kind of nervous about it. So obviously there's going to be an element of recovery that's required. And what Rezolve does is it helps bring people back into those physical locations, helps drive them back. So we're very compelling to these partners to help reinvigorate the physical world. I mean, there's not just what we do. I mean, we have, as I said, social media and URL links and all sorts of other cool things. But that's the driver at the moment of our growth. So in the next couple of years, we don't need to do anything other than support the existing partners we have, because they've got such a huge volume of consumers and merchants for us to reach. We have 1 billion consumers to penetrate within the existing partner base, and over 20 million merchants to penetrate within the existing partner base. And what we've disclosed to the market was, as of October last year, was 138,000 merchants. 138,000 merchants out of 20 million, plenty of growth there, right? So we don't need to do anything. But of course, we are going to do things. We are going to sign new distribution partners in new markets in Europe and in North America and South America, as I mentioned, and Latin America. And when we sign those, we massively extend our reach. So this is a super exciting business going through an extraordinary inflection point. And it's a rare breed. It's a rare breed, hence the unicorn. It's that kind of there's plenty of unicorns out, but that's the market. The technology today has allowed companies like Rezolve to develop fast into high growth, high return opportunities.
And now a word from our sponsor, Accelerate, one of Canada's most innovative and fastest growing alternative investment solution providers, with a suite of institutional caliber alternative ETFs for investors seeking diversification and long-term performance. The Accelerate One Choice Alternative Portfolio ETF, symbol 1C, ONEC on the TSX, is Canada's first alternatives portfolio solution, providing exposure to 6 alternative asset classes, 10 alternative strategies in one easy-to-use, one choice ETF that charges a management fee of just 0.2%. The Accelerate One Choice Alternative Portfolio ETF trades under the symbol 1C, ONEC on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Find out more at accelerateshares.com.
And so you had mentioned a few names earlier, but who have been some of the most important mentors that you've had during your career?
Well, my father was a mentor, obviously, because he was a corporate executive. He ran BMW Great Britain and Volkswagen, Audi and other car companies. And so he helped shape my early desire to start a business and help me understand how a business plan can be built and so on. But thereafter, I didn't really get mentoring. I learned from reading books and learning on the job. I have enormous respect. I've had the fortunate experience of having met some of the most impressive entrepreneurs and business leaders on the planet over the years that I've been in business and worked with them. And the one who stood out more than any other, and I've been fortunate enough to meet many of the most famous people who are around today running the largest corporations, was Rupert Murdoch. who always never really had the best reputational coverage and profile. But he stood out to me as an individual who really understood his business, the detail of his business, and was a real rolled up sleeves kind of, executive. And, when I met him for the first time in the late 90s, he was already running a huge operation. And like many other guys I met, but he seemed so much more hands-on and so much more in tune, and I have a high regard and still do. I think he's an incredibly impressive guy. But other than that, I don't really have a mentor as such. I think I've just forged my own path. And I think that I don't do everything right. As you get older, you realize, hang on a moment, I'm now 58, I must be doing something right. You get to a point where you start to think, actually, maybe I might know better than the next guy at what I'm doing. I've never really had that arrogance to think that. And in many cases, I never could have justified it. There was never a reason to justify it. But I do feel very comfortable about what I'm doing now, and I do feel that I'm on the right path. I do feel like I know what levers to push and what not to do, and how to make this the world leader that I think it's going to become.
It certainly seems like it, and it definitely feels like you're well on your way, especially with this recently announced going public transaction. Now, Dan, before we let you go today or tonight, your time, one last thing, what parting advice would you give to new founders or those considering entrepreneurship?
Well, I always say the same thing: go for it. Everybody will tell you not to, and you don't need to know anything. And just as Reid Hoffman said about jumping off the cliff and building the plane on the way down, that's what you have to do. You just have to go for it. Everybody is capable of doing anything they want. And the thing that holds everyone back is fear and people telling them not to. Everyone's got a reason why not. I mean, my mother burst into tears when I said I was going to leave my ad agency job and start my company. She begged me not to do it. She said, you didn't go to university, you left school early, you finally got the job that gives you a prospect. Now you're going to throw it all away and start some crazy thing to do with computers. This was the advice I got. And of course, it kind of turned my head a bit, but I think that the thing is that when you want to start something, you must have total confidence in your ability. Everything is in your control. Every day is an opportunity to create something, and every day is an opportunity to build something and to overcome any challenges you had yesterday. It's all down to you. So I would say to anybody can be an entrepreneur, and all they have to do is go for it.
There's some great words of wisdom. Go for it. So with that, we'll wrap things up here, Dan. Thank you so much. For investors interested in looking more into Rezolve and their going public transaction, the SPAC that they're merging with, ticker symbol AACI, that is Armada Acquisition Corp. And then once that's complete, you have the ticker symbol ZONE, ZONE. So Dan, thank you so much, and we wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thanks so much, guys. Really nice to meet you both. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Absolute Return Podcast. This episode was brought to you by Accelerate Financial Technologies. Accelerate, because performance matters. Find out more at accelerateshares.com. The views expressed in this podcast are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the views of Accelerate. No aspect of this podcast constitutes investment, legal, or tax advice. Opinions expressed in this podcast should not be viewed as a recommendation or solicitation of an offer to buy or sell any securities or investment strategies. The information and opinions in this podcast are based on current market conditions and may fluctuate and change in the future. No representation or warranty, expressed or implied, is made on behalf of Accelerate as to the accuracy or completeness of the information contained in this podcast. Accelerate does not accept any liability for any direct, indirect, or consequential loss or damage suffered by any person as a result of relying on all or any part of this podcast, and any liability is expressly disclaimed.